Was supposed to co-present with me, but she had an accident and is not here, but she's okay. This is a session for CEUs too, so for continuing education, if you need continuing education, who's signing in the back? Anybody? Are you? Okay, great. So this is about positive behavior support, and I have geared this, because of the continuing education, I've geared this to behavior analysts, but not exclusively behavior analysts, okay? So how many behavior analysts do we have in this room? Keep your hands high. Keep your hands high. Okay. And so people who are striving to be in school, studying to be behavior analysts? Okay, good. You didn't fall for that trick saying that I'm a behavior analyst in the future. How many parents, family members? Excellent. Okay. Educators? Other behavioral health or developmental disabilities providers? Beautiful. Okay.
Administrators?
Administrators.
Thank you, man. Come on, man.
Yeah, the unsung heroes.
I love you, Dan.
So we have about how much time left?
5 minutes.
And we got to end at 3, right? No, I have a plan. Would you give me an let me know when we're at, say... Okay. Can y'all hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay. One more try I'm going to do with this thing. I'm not so good at technology today. Anyway, this is about positive behavior support. And for those of you who plan ahead and are very good at getting your work done well in advance, and you look at people like me, sitting in the session just before this session, putting your slides together, and you think, thank God I'm not that person. I just want you to know something. I learned something in the last presentation, and it's about having a disclaimer on here. Okay? So that wouldn't be there if I wasn't putting my slides together the past hour. I didn't put them all together. Anyway, so the reason, the impetus for this presentation was, once again, like several other presenters at this conference, Dee kind of roped me and Barbara into this presentation based on this issue about the FDA banning the use of electrical stimulation devices, electric shock devices. How many of you were aware of this? Okay, some of you. So the FDA actually, they put out a call to the public asking for input on should we ban these devices or should we not. And they came up with a white paper, a position statement on the use of aversives. And the reason for it comes from this image. This is a young man, I don't know his age, it's a blurry photograph from a wall-mounted camera. But he's strapped down to this area here. And he has these electrical devices that, that the staff are using to send a shock to him when he fights, when he is aggressive, when he does whatever. And this has been going on in this particular agency for many years. And people can't shut this agency down. And the agency was founded on, by somebody who studied under B.F. Skinner, the founder of modern behavior analysis. And the person who founded this organization claims this is a very behaviorally run organization. And if you think of a behaviorally run organization as one that is very good at providing swift and immediate consequences to behavior that they find challenging, then this organization is very, very good. But most of you know that's not all there is to understanding behavior. It's not just about negative consequences. It's more about the positive consequences and helping people create positive lives and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, that was the impetus behind this presentation. Now, it's so far removed from what you all do and what we do here in Arizona. But I do want to tie it, I want to make it more relevant, because I want to talk about the use of aversives. Aversive consequences, aversive stimuli that are used as consequences in an attempt to try to punish the behavior. And sometimes it looks like this. Have you ever seen this picture? This picture was published a while ago when the Government Accountability Office came out with a report on the use of seclusion and restraints in schools and how some kids have been harmed, seriously injured, some kids have actually died. And the report was basically saying we don't know the extent of this because there's been no requirement to report this data. So what we're doing is we're trying to make everybody aware that there is a problem because of the deaths and the injuries, and let's move forward. So since that report, most states, including ours, have come up with legislation to prevent the use of restraint and seclusion on students in schools, except in the case of imminent harm. Okay? So if somebody's picking up a chair and he's going to whack Kyle over the head with it, and you can intervene and it involves physically restraining the person, by God do so, right? That's imminent harm. But we don't use seclusion and restraint as a consequence to non-compliance. By the way, this whole incident started because this individual refused to take his coat off. Okay? We'll come back to that later. The point is, there is still reason to be concerned about the use of aversives in interventions to reduce problem behavior. And part of the reason is because we have so many more alternatives now than we used to. How many of you have seen this picture? In the video that goes along with this, a high school girl refused to leave class, and this is a series of cell phone shots that another student took about how the officer pulled her out. How about this picture? The 8-year-old boy with the handcuffs around his elbows because they slip off his wrists. This wasn't too long ago. This was like a couple of years ago. This is restraint. This is in a school. This picture, I bring this up because it's the cover of a report. Orphanages, training schools, reform schools, and now this, recommendations to prevent the disproportionate placement and inadequate treatment of children with disabilities in the juvenile justice system. Okay. How many of you have heard of the school-to-prison pipeline? It's something that happens, basically the research is that when we suspend a student once, that person is more likely to be suspended again. If this person is suspended multiple times, they're more likely to get in trouble with the law. Okay? End up in juvenile corrections or whatever. And there's been a lot of awareness in the past few years about the disproportionality of suspensions, the disproportionality of restraints and seclusions. And it's not just about, I mean, it is true that boys, African American boys, are much more likely to suffer the more severe consequences for some of the same behaviors as other students. But it's also much more likely that people with disabilities, students with disabilities, will end up suspended, restrained, secluded, or otherwise just generally excluded from the education. How about this? Is this familiar to anybody? You ever seen this before? Right. It's a typical spanking that happens in so many homes There's no law against it. I'm not telling you not to do it. But what I do want to do in this time we have left is draw a parallel between this and the first slide you saw and how it all ties together and how our behavior is shaped into doing these kinds of things when we're not aware of it and when we lack the other alternatives. Does that make sense? And I'm not saying that there's never a time for an aversive consequence like a spank or anything like that. I will not say there's never been a child, there's never a situation where somebody isn't going to be better off if they get a swat on the behind. I personally don't do it, but that doesn't mean, it doesn't mean there isn't a time. The people who are the strongest advocates for this program were the parents who had their sons and daughters in this program, who could not get services anywhere else. And they were gouging their eyes out. They were beating the crap out of themselves. They were biting their own nails and fingernails and lips off. They had very, very severe challenging behavior. And everywhere else that these individuals were served did not help them. So when some of that self-injurious behavior started to go down, these parents were elated because this is the first time somebody was able to help them. There's no question in my mind that the use of shocking people is bad. We don't allow it for suspected terrorists, so why for children and people with disabilities? Shocking people with little or no power and little or no counter control is even worse. B.F. Skinner, again, in his book, Beyond Freedom and Dignity, goes into great detail about people in our societies who have little or no counter control. The institutionalized, prisoners, et cetera, et cetera. You're all familiar with the prisoner study where, a group of students were split in. You're the prisoners and you're the guards. And what happened? Within days, the prisoners just got crazy with power. If we don't learn from that, and we think that we're so arrogant to think, well, that'll never happen to me, it'll happen to you, right? That's what this presentation is all about, to try to help you understand how we end up sliding into these kinds of situations and how we can avoid them. I want you to put yourself in the place of the parents who have begged for effective treatment for their children. And I already talked about that. But now I want you to try to put yourself in the place of the caregivers, the staff, the people who actually push the button to shock the person. The teacher who wrestles these kids to the ground and holds them there or holds her there. If that's, sorry. So let's start with this. Anybody familiar with this study? A large meta-analysis. That means it's a research study of a lot of other research studies, and it's been cited many, many times, and I love it. It looked at 88 studies, 62 years of research, 36,000 participants in all of these different studies that had 11 different measures in common. For these 36,000 individuals that they studied, they looked at 11 different child behaviors and experiences, okay? And I'll tell you what, the first 10 of them were all bad outcomes, the kinds of outcomes we wouldn't wish for our kids or ourselves. Decreased moral internalization, increased child aggression, increased child delinquent and antisocial behavior, decreased quality of parent-child relationships, decreased child mental health, increased risk of being a victim of physical abuse, increased adult aggression, increased adult criminal and antisocial behavior, decreased adult mental health, increased risk of abusing their own child or spouse. With all of these 10 things that are more likely to happen to kids whose primary discipline approach or experiences were corporal punishment. Why in the world do we keep doing it? And it's because of the 11th thing. Increased immediate compliance. It works in the moment. This is called the seduction of coercive compliance. And I want to share what does it do to the learner and what does it do to the caregivers, the people who carry it out. And by caregivers, it's a generic term. Parents, teachers, foster parents, group home staff, paraprofessionals, anybody who is working with and trying to support somebody who needs that kind of support. And by learner, I'm talking about adults, children, with or without disabilities, in school, in home, etc. Anybody who is being supported by another person. Does that make sense? Those are just my generic terms. So, and here's my disclaimer. All of these pictures I showed you, I don't know any of those people in the pictures. I don't know the stories behind those kids. I don't know anything. What I'm sharing with you is my interpretation of a possible explanation that might justify both the child behavior or the learner behavior and the caregiver behavior based on research of coercion. Okay? But this isn't what happened, because I don't know what happened. So this picture, I don't know these people, but just imagine with me how it could start, okay? So the parent sends the child to her room for criticizing the parent. The parent is tired of that. How many of you have ever been dissed by your kid? But that's bad news for the learner because this child wants to keep getting a reaction from her mom. So then, after the parent tries to send her to the room, the child refuses, she yells and she criticizes the parent even more. This is bad news for the caregiver who wants this behavior to stop. Any of you parents ever wanted your children to stop their behavior? So after that, then the parent spanks the child after many threats. If you don't stop, I'm going to spank you. If you don't stop, I'm going to take this away. If you don't stop, on and on. But finally, after many threats, she spanks the child. This is good news for the child. She gets a reaction. Believe it or not, some kids, some individuals, find that kind of reaction, even if it's painful, a reinforcer. I am not saying that every child who has been spanked likes it, okay? I'm not saying that. I'm saying that if this is a pattern, if this spanking between this mom and this child is a pattern and it happens over and over and over again, we have to look at why could it be? What would it possibly explain it? And we often think, well, of course she doesn't like it. Why would he like it when I yell and I raise my voice? Nobody likes that. Well, sometimes it's the only kind of attention that they have control over. They can make it happen. They can turn it on. They can turn it off. And sometimes, for some people, they find that more valuable than the other forms of attention they get from them. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
Does this make sense?
Yes.
So you can see how this could reinforce the child's behavior if this pattern happens over and over and over again. You have your antecedent, you have your behavior, and you have your consequence. But that's not how it ends. After the parent spanks the child goes to her room, which is good news for the caregiver. Because now, she's not in my face criticizing me anymore. And those of you who are frantically writing this down, I will make sure that the slides are available at the Autism Coalition website, and that you'll be able to get them. I would have done this weeks and months ago because I'm normally that proactive. But I figured that I thought there might be something I could learn from the session just before this session. So here in the blue you can see this blue represents the cycle, the antecedent, the behavior, the consequence for the child. Okay? The antecedent is parent sends her to a room, and oh yeah, look at that. The parent sends the child, or tells the child to go to a room. Child refuses, that's the B, that's the behavior, and as a consequence, the parent finally gives that emotional reaction that the child has been trying to get. But if we look at the red here, we see the same antecedent behavior consequence for the parent. The antecedent is the child refusing to follow directions and go to her room. The B is the parent's behavior. She spanks the child after many threats. And the C is the consequence. What happens? The child goes to her room and the criticizing ends. Okay? That's negative reinforcement, and that's what happens. That's what contributes to the coercion and the repeated behavior. Why would the parent do this again and again and again? Because it works for her in the moment. It's not helping in the long run, but in the moment she's able to bring that behavior to a stop. You with me?
Yes.
Okay. How about this guy? Let's take it, we'll try. All right? And again, I don't know him. I'm making this up, but I'm making it up based on research. The teacher tries to get the child to do work. This is bad news for the learner because he wants out of work. Anybody know children who don't want to do their schoolwork? Child refuses. He's up out of his seat. He's disruptive. This is bad news for the teacher because she wants him to stop. So then the teacher calls security, who restrains him. She didn't really call security to say, I need this child restrained. She's saying, I'd like this child out of the classroom. He's disrupting everything, whatever. Okay? But those of you who may work in schools know once you call security, it's out of your control. Once you call 911, you don't have a choice in what happens. They do what they're trained to do. And they're not trained in positive behavior support. Most of them. So a teacher calls security, who comes in and restrains him. This is good news for the learner because now there's no way he can do the work. He's got an excuse. Child becomes less disruptive. Good news for the caregiver. Because now she can get on with teaching the rest of the kids. Is it plausible? This is how coercion works. It is very plausible. There are kids who would rather be locked up like this than having to do work that's too boring or too hard for them. And why, we don't know, but some people are just wired that. So here's the cycle for the child, and here's the cycle for the adult. Are you seeing a pattern? Any questions? Bless you. I put a lot of pictures in, so I had to come up with a lot of stories. So now we got this picture. 2:30. And we're going to move on beyond this picture. Because it's a lot like the last one. In my slides that you'll see after I upload them, and you can go there, you will see all of these different examples in here. Okay? There is a pattern. This is the coercion cycle. It's been researched and talked about for a long, long time. And the point I want you to understand is that as we as behavior analysts are very, very good at analyzing the behavior of others. But frankly, we suck at analyzing the behavior of ourselves. And we have the skills, we have the science, we have the knowledge, the research is out there. We need to tap into that research to push our field forward so that we don't end up with stuff like this. Because we're smart enough, we can do this. I'll give you a couple of examples of how we can do that, okay, as soon as we get through all of this. You can tell that I am somebody who over-prepares. Just not early enough. Treatment integrity. So that's how well somebody, if I write a behavior plan and I say, Kyle, I need you and your staff to go take this plan and implement it in your school. And I walk away and I never go back. Shame on me. Because if it was as simple as that, I'd be writing scripts and saying, go forth and behave, you know? And it's not. We, caregivers, have to change our behavior before the people we support change their behavior. It is about us. Somebody has to be the grown-up. We have to do it first. Their behavior will then follow. But if we just assume that I can do a training like this and now you're going to be able to, break coercion cycles, that's crazy. I have to provide Kyle training. I have to show him what I mean. I have to answer questions. I have to have him demonstrate for me that he knows how to do it and give him feedback, and do so early enough and often enough that he has the confidence to be able to do this. And then I need to put in checks and balances along the way and make sure that he's still doing it and that the other people that he works with are doing it as well. That's what we talk about when we talk about treatment integrity, okay? And so there's a lot of studies about why, the importance of treatment integrity, and how we can, what gets in the way of treatment integrity. One of the things is that coercion cycle. And I want to point your attention to this article in particular. This was amazing. This was a study where they taught people, they had 5 days of training, and they taught staff the difference between responding to behaviors now and falling into that coercion cycle versus ignoring, redirecting, and waiting to respond after the child behaves in a way that you want them to do, right? They taught therapeutic skills. They taught behavior management skills. 5 days of training for the staff. Then they watched and they put them in situations where they didn't know the people they were working with. And what happened? They fell back into coercive patterns. They fell back into the coercive patterns. They started to do the things that would bring the problem behavior to an immediate end now, because that was more reinforcing than the better long-term goal of doing the right thing, ignoring it, redirecting it, teaching, prompting another behavior in order to reinforce that behavior. Because it didn't, by doing that, it didn't immediately bring the problem behavior to an end. Even after 5 days of training, the coercion cycle reared its ugly head and people fell into that trap. Training and performance feedback to help caregivers use new behavior intervention skills may not be enough if the intervention doesn't also reinforce desirable caregiver behaviors. This is that arrogance part I'm talking about. Don't assume that you are beyond the need for reinforcement. If you're going to change your behavior, and every time there's a behavior plan, there will be some behavior change. Okay? There needs to be. Because if you don't change your behavior, then why have the plan? So if you're going to change your behavior, there needs to be reinforcement for that behavior. And the reinforcement has to compete with the reinforcement of bringing the problem behavior to a swift and immediate conclusion right now. I can tell Kyle to just, hey, I need you to pay more attention when I'm talking because it's really important. This is stuff you'll benefit from, right? And then I can continue to talk and then I see Kyle is drifting off, and pretty soon he's turning around, he's talking to his neighbor, and Kyle, what did I say before? Okay, and then every time I come back to him, he stops, he focuses on me, he gives me that a little bit of immediate attention, but by the 6th time, it's like, Kyle, what did I tell you, right? Good people do bad things, not because they wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to yell at somebody today, but because they're shaped into it. This is how the world works. This is a principle. It's not a value. It's not something we strive to be. This is just how it works. When we can terminate something aversive right now, real quickly, we are more likely to do it again and again and again. And if we know that that's how the world works, then we have a responsibility to arrange and design an environment that helps us change our behavior in the midst of that. But I think it's just so arrogant to think we can somehow control our behavior, but the people we support need to have reinforcers built in and all this sort of stuff. No, we need them too. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Preaching to the choir? Okay, I like singing. Other people sing. So what's the solution? This is from the BCBA-D website. This is the definition of positive behavior support, but there's lots of definitions and a couple of things here. It's a set of processes that combine information from social, behavioral, biomedical science. That's important. It's not just about behavior analysis. It's about other sciences as well. And applies this information at the individual and or systems level. It's not just about one student's behavior, but we're applying it across all school environments for 1,000 kids in the same school. To reduce behavior challenges, improve quality of life. Both systems-wide and individualized interventions used in PBS are empirically documented and can be used by a wide range of support providers. So it is replicable. Okay? I can't say positive behavior support or PBS or positive behavior interventions and supports or PBIS. I can't say those terms in a presentation without showing the pyramid. I would be arrested by the BCBA-D police. But the pyramid just reflects a wide range of supports that we can and should put into place. This pyramid represents the kinds of supports that you think about when you're supporting one individual, not a whole school, but just one individual. And you think about the bottom of the pyramid as that foundation. And we need to have, people need to have safe and engaging environments. They need to have supportive relationships. Meaningful goals, not just putting widgets together, but meaningful goals. Effective instruction to help them learn the skills to meet those goals. Differential reinforcement so that they can learn when I do this, good things happen. When I do this, not so much. And we need to be able to help them plan ahead for challenging routines. If we did that for every student, everybody in our care, we would do tremendous good. But sometimes that's not enough. So then we move up the pyramid a little bit more. And for people where this isn't enough, we want to make sure that they have more opportunities to respond and practice the new behaviors so that they have more opportunities to experience the reinforcement that comes from those new behaviors. Does that make sense? And then at the tip, we need to have an individual assessment, an individual plan, and functional consequences so that we're reinforcing the behaviors that we value, we're not reinforcing the behaviors that we don't value, and we're teaching them to become less dependent on us and be more successful in life. So in a general sense, this is kind of a PBIS pyramid. I like this. This was published back in '97. I repeat it over and over again, but I like this because it's very succinct. One of the goals of positive behavior support is to make the challenging behavior irrelevant, ineffective, and inefficient. Okay? So that means a number of different things. Here's that example of spanking again. Here's the coercion cycle between the parent and the child. Let me present a possible solution in a different visual. So, I've got this pointer, I just got it. Given minimal attention from the parent, and then when she's asked to stop criticizing her mom, she continues to criticize in order to get an emotional reaction from the parent. In this case, it turned out to be a spank. But it wasn't just a spank, there's lots of things that lead up to that. You with me so far? This is our functional hypothesis. What do we want the child to do instead of continuing to criticize? When she's asked to stop criticizing, we want her to stop and be nice, right? Just like all other pretty little girls your age. Be nice. And what does she get when she's nice? A big fat thank you. Maybe. What does she want? She wants a pretty intense emotional reaction from her parent. Okay? What I want you to understand here is this is an expected behavior we want her to learn to do just like other girls her age. But if wanting it hasn't produced it in all these years? And even if we add more than a big fat thank you, and we add stickers and charts and stuff, and the problem still exists, then we have to do something else. We have to teach her a way to get her own needs met. And what does she want in this case? She wants an emotional reaction from her parent. So what could we do? We could teach her how to ask for one-on-one time to talk. And let's talk about my behavior. Let's talk about the things that you love about me. I need you to tell me why I'm your favorite daughter, okay? Something that can compete with the spanking, right? Maybe it's wrestling. Maybe it's going for a run around the block together with mom. But whatever it is, we can compete with that. We can find a way to compete with that. And this is called teaching a replacement behavior. In the previous presentation with Diana and Dr. Blitz, they mentioned functional communication training. See, I'm always attending to those sessions before mine because I'm learning so much from it. This is functional communication training, replacement behaviors. This is teaching the person to ask to get their own needs met, okay? Remember this little guy in this coercion cycle? He gets out of work. So let's put it in a different way. When work is too hard or too boring, and he's instructed to continue, he refuses, he gets up, he disrupts others in order to get out of doing the work. The way he got out of doing the work was to have the SRO come and put him in handcuffs and then take him out of the class. But the goal is to get out of work. What do we want him to do? We want him to do the work. What does he get when he does the work? A big fat thank you. What does he want? He wants to get out of the work. What would be a good replacement behavior for him? Ask for a break. Exactly. If he asks for a break and we honor that, then he can get out of the work. So I mentioned earlier, positive behavior support is about making challenging behavior irrelevant, ineffective, and inefficient. Is there a way in this slide that you can see we're making challenging behavior irrelevant? In other words, there's no need for the challenging behavior to occur if it's just he's got his needs met all the time. Not so much in this slide. We go back to the pyramid, and we see the green stuff at the bottom of the pyramid. If he's in a safe and engaging environment, if he's in responsive, supportive relationships, if he has meaningful goals and he's taught how to do those goals, then the problem behavior probably would be irrelevant because what he wants to do is get out of doing this task. If he had meaningful goals and he knew how to do them, he wouldn't need to be getting out of the task. But in this particular situation, we're talking about making challenging behavior inefficient. And it's inefficient relative to what? Inefficient relative to the problem behavior. The problem behavior is getting up, refusing, getting up, disrupting others. But it gets him out of doing the task. The replacement behavior is asking for a break, and it gets the same thing. Which one is easier to do? Ask for a task, as long as it works, right? So we got to give him a way to make sure that the teacher doesn't miss it. Big yellow card, something to get her attention to make sure that when he asks, it will be honored. But when he asks and it is honored, we often see the challenging behavior go down, the replacement behavior go up. Does that make sense? Yes?
What if he asks for several breaks in a row?
Several breaks in a row. Oh, and
Sorry.
what do we have to end? Is it time to end now?
Oh. Sorry, Dan.
Where we got 4 more minutes. Okay.
Sorry, Dan.
No, actually, thank you. That's a wonderful question. So here's my answer. So you're saying that the problem behavior is going down, but the asking is going up? and I'm thinking to myself, this is a problem I would love to have. Okay? This is a problem we can fix. Because most of us in this room are behavior analysts or soon-to-be behavior analysts. There are so many behavioral tricks we can build into this. We can build in a delay so that when he asks, we say, hey, I see you, I'll be right there, and then we, we go. But next time he asks, we do a couple other things, and then we go. And next time he asks, a couple more things, and then we go. We can come up with we can make it so that he can only ask after certain activities. We can do all kinds of tricks. But what we gotta do first is get over this belief that he has to comply all of the time, and we can't give him what he wants all of the time, because then he'll never, learn the things that we need him to learn. He'll never do the work. But that's not what we're finding. If we have proper reinforcers for doing the work and other reinforcers, functional reinforcers for asking for a break, then he learns 2 skills. And he becomes better prepared for life because he's learning how to advocate for himself, rather than depend on this bubble of all-knowing, well-meaning, always available staff who know his every needs all of the time. Thank you for that question.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, so I'm going to move on really quickly, and you guys are going to have good material to put yourself to sleep. This is part of our Behavior Analyst Certification Board Ethical Code. This is considerations regarding punishment procedures. 1, if punishment, and I'm just going to talk about the ones that are highlighted. If punishment procedures are necessary, and sometimes they are necessary, and sometimes punishment procedures are, most of the time punishment procedures are not the shock. They're a little timeout. They're a little, loss of privilege for a little bit. And it happens. But if they are necessary, behavior analysts always include reinforcement procedures for alternative behavior in the behavior change program. Now here's my only beef with that. And that is alternative behavior could mean a lot of things. There is nothing in here that says we need to consider replacement behaviors, functionally equivalent replacement behaviors. So it's my job, and I hope that it's some of your job too, to continually and always push our field forward. And there are ways that we can do that. Behavior analysts ensure that aversive procedures are accompanied by an increased level of training, supervision, and oversight. We talked about training. It is absolutely necessary, but it may not be enough. If we design an intervention plan that punishes the caregiver rather than reinforces the caregiver, then it's not going to be enough. Well, I was going to say, what do we do for this guy? How can we design that competing pathways for this guy? He just gets to get out of there. Because there's a culture surrounded with the staff who do this. Nothing against them. They started to get experience, to earn a job, earn a pay, but they are surrounded by like-minded people who all do the same thing. And how many of you are really good at telling your friends, no, I don't want to do that. I want to do something else. I want to be somebody else. It's hard. When we're around people who do certain things, we do the same stuff. And when you look day in and day out for bad behavior, you will see it again and again and again. If you are in a different environment and you're surrounded by peers who work really hard day in and day out for the positive behaviors, you will see that over and over again. So it's the environment that really plays a huge picture here. Okay. Reducing the use of aversives in service to others. 1, focus much more on the preventative interventions, the things at the bottom of the pyramid, the improvements in the quality of life and the relationships, routines that make sense, settings that make sense, including things we don't understand, like medical conditions and quality of life. Quality of life, behavior analysts have avoided it for a long time because it's not easy to measure. It's muddy, it's dirty. But we all know it matters, right? We just have to get better at defining what quality of life means and being able to measure it and say, yes, we've achieved it, no, we haven't. We need to respect the findings of others that inform us about the widespread and inequitable use of aversives in all populations to gain perspective on the extent of the problem. By that I mean, if you're concerned about restraint in schools because you know a student who's been restrained not just for aggressive behavior but for non-compliance, take a look at other situations. Take a look at the research on suspensions, on expulsions. Take a look at police shootings, police arrests. Take a look at the disproportionality among certain racial groups, among people with disabilities. Take a look at all of these different kinds of exclusionary and aversive kinds of interventions. Because when you look at all of them, even when you go back to the lynchings in the South, you see common themes in where these are happening and what groups. Advocate for and promote position statements and laws that cause our field to evolve more quickly in a given direction. I showed you a brief picture of the NASD policy statement, their position statement. TASH, APBS, so many other groups and so many other organizations are pushing for a more positive and effective approach to people with challenging behavior. Those play a role. It's not just about science. It's about guiding the science in a direction that we want it to go. And this is a good place to focus our energy on. Be open to the evidence of treatments that are on the edges or outside our field that hold promise for reinforcing therapeutic caregiver behavior even in the face of adversity. What I told you about in the coercion cycle is the immediate reinforcement of a caregiver being able to bring that behavior to an end right now, okay? But that's not the only reinforcer for that behavior, for their behavior. We got to get better at helping caregivers act in mindful ways, like our earlier presentation, being more aware of those opportunities to live up to their highest expectations or whatever. There's a field of science out there called positive psychology we could learn a ton from, okay? And we need to. Until there is a better way to meet the caregiver needs and avoid coercion cycles, teach and honor the use of replacement behaviors when you can. We can't always replace the function of certain behaviors. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. That's a prime example. You can't compete with rock and roll. But there's often times that we can, and we should strive to include behavior plans that actually do teach replacement behaviors. So, to make positive behavior support to make challenging behavior irrelevant, ineffective, and inefficient is one goal. But another goal consider to help you and the caregivers live up to your own highest expectations, whatever they might be. I think there's an element for reinforcement in there that could really help us, and I think I need all of you to help us move this field forward. Thank you very much.